years ago, a couple of years back. I guess that's just something that was put out there in a chat one night or something like that, and it kind of stuck. I mean, they kind of branded me with it, unfortunately.
So you became the tactical leprechaun. Are you
Yep,
Irish?
little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Irish and Welsh.
Irish and Welsh. I gotcha. I gotcha. No one could hear us. I asked you why you were called Tactical Leprechaun. Also, I want to plug my Patreon, patreon.com/ John Crump. Can you guys still not hear me?
Wow. Technical difficulties. Gotta love it.
Give me 1 second here. Oh, they have sound now. I don't know. That's kind of weird. All right.
No telling.
I'm blaming you, man. I'm blaming you. All
Yeah.
right. So visit my site at patreon.com/ John Crump and you can support me. This is Fireside Chats, episode 26, I believe, with CloverTac. All right. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How'd you get into guns?
That's just it's a part of life, quite honestly. Um, I get asked that a lot, and people come into it at a later age, sometimes even in teenage years, sometimes in their 30s and 40s and 50s and whatever, and they remember the first firearm that they ever shot and that sort of thing. I couldn't tell you. I mean, I've got literal baby pictures of me standing in front of gun cabinets and gun racks and in the seat of the truck with the gun rack in the back window, and I've got memories of some of the first firearms that I shot. But in talking with grandfather at the time, he's passed away, and he passed away when I was, oh goodness, I don't know, probably 13 or 14 or something like that. And I want to say probably my first time was with him. Unfortunately, he passed away before we ever had that conversation, right, about
Mm-hmm.
what the first time was. So all I can do is kind of piece some things together, and I've got some assumption as to what a few different firearms that it probably was, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's just always been a lifestyle, man, for me. I mean, rural East Texas, hunting and shooting, whether it's hunting squirrel or deer, or more recently pigs. They weren't nearly as bad back in the day as they are now. Rabbits, that sort of thing, versus just shooting cans off the fence post, man, and things like that. That was a weekend thing to just kind of go out in the woods with the 22 and a pocket full of ammo.
Yeah, have you seen the videos where people hog hunt from helicopters with machine guns?
Yeah, that's really cool. One of these days, when I reach the YouTube big time, I hope to get invited to one of those because they're super expensive. Like I certainly can't afford one. Maybe a crowdfunding thing. Maybe we need to crowdfund that.
Yeah, I think I see Archangel out there, and I'm pretty sure he'll pay for you to do it.
There you go. Yeah, he's got all the money.
Oh yeah, I heard he's mega rich, live in this huge ass mansion and stuff like that. Now, how did you get into YouTube with the guns?
YouTube with the guns. Well, I was already on YouTube. Owned a tech related business, basically. I guess you could call it a PC repair shop. And did some videos with that for YouTube in the very early days of YouTube. YouTube was kind of like just a place where you shared things, right? If you had family across the country or people you were displaced in any way, you could kind of upload it to YouTube and say, hey, check this out. This is how you do X, Y, and Z. And back then it was kind of computer related, definitely electronics type niche. And of course, like I said, I've always been into the firearms and stuff like that. So it was inevitable that somebody was like, well, how do you, and I don't even remember the first video because the CloverTac channel is actually, what, 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old now. So it's new compared to the stuff I was doing, and I had some firearm content that was actually on that, what you would call a computer related channel. So that stuff's moved over. So since then, I've kind of forgot what the first video was, but yeah, it was a repair or modification of some kind, and that somebody wanted, and I was like, okay, well, yeah, I can do a video and kind of walk you through that and upload it to YouTube, and it kind of went from there. You know.
Right. How'd you start doing the podcast?
The podcast started out. It's been a major evolution on the podcast. I don't know how long I was on YouTube. About 2 years. I guess I was on probably the CloverTac channel anyway. We're going to talk specifically the firearm side of things, but um, I was probably about 2 years, maybe something like that, and decided that I wanted to get it a little more serious with the whole, online media, YouTube thing. Was already pretty big in a lot of the Facebook groups, admin to a lot of different groups and things like that. Thought, okay, let's take this to the next level or try to and see what happens. And one of the things that I decided to do at the time was education, was actually research and learn, take some online courses and classes and different things, and having to do with algorithms and SEO and how do you attract certain audiences and keep your watch time and retention high and all of this other stuff. And so that was kind of a New Year's resolution about 2 years or so into the CloverTac channel. So kicked that off, and a few weeks later, something like that, I was actually in a creator group, and somebody had mentioned, the live streaming and stuff like that. And I thought, oh wow, that could be cool. So at that time, I started I believe, trying to even think because they wash together so much. I believe at that time I kicked off a Firearm Friday podcast, which we still have our live stream, and we still have the Firearm Friday, of course, but it's a totally different format now. But kicked that off, and it was just myself and the audience. It wasn't a panel show, didn't have guests, nothing like that. And from there, it got to the point that I was making connections in the community, in the culture, in the industry, and it got into the whole thing to where you could have, figured out you could have guests on panels and different things. So I kind of moved from that point. I moved, what am I thinking? I moved to Fire Friday, the me and the audience to Monday, and I called that MOA Monday. And then I turned Firearm Friday into we would have guests on or panels, discuss topics of the day, or talk about said, industry manufacturer or whatever it might be. And then eventually added, I've got a pretty hefty background in youth shooting sports, so it's a big passion of mine. And so eventually wanted to add that. So added the Wednesday live at some point along the way there. Dealing with youth, and then turned around, and because of my interest in the tech side and having that, like I said, that background in education and history and other things, worked up to the Fire Friday, and then from there the progression sort of went that I was doing basically four lives a week, which was pretty brutal. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty rough. So props to anybody out there that's certainly going 5 nights a week or something like that. And then October of last year hit. Oh good Lord, it's kind of scary to think about because it's nearly a year ago to the date almost. I think it was crazy because it definitely happened before Halloween, and I got a YouTube strike on, and you're familiar, of course, with the After Hours live stream where we talk about tech-related stuff. We don't discuss political stuff, really, or anything like that. I got dinged on an After Hours chat that basically was teaching people how to start a podcast.
Why
It was that simple. We talked about Podbean and Anchor and, how you record it and how you upload it, record it and produce it and upload it and all those aspects. So YouTube dinged it and said that it was found to be content that was scamming, spamming, or some other wording they put. It was content that was found to be spamming, scamming, or intentionally misleading, or something along those lines. So I appealed, lost the appeal, believe it or not.
Why? Did they ever say why?
Well, of course not. It's YouTube, right? So they just said, you broke our guidelines. And the only reason I know of the spamming, scamming, and illicit activity, or however they worded it, I can't even remember. I've got a screenshot somewhere The only reason that I know that is because when they deleted it, and I can't even remember who out there in the interwebs did this for me, but they went to try to view that in replay, and it popped up on the screen. The screen was black, the video wouldn't play, and it had the little error icon thing, the little TV thing with a line through it, and it actually had that message on my video. I never seen that message, but they screenshotted it. So I mean, it was there. They were basically, in my opinion, they were slandering me a little bit because obviously I wasn't engaging in that type of activity. Yet there it was on my video. It was bad enough they took it down and they gave me a strike, but now they're going to put it out there for the world to see and basically call me a criminal, right? Call me a Nigerian prince, if you will. And so that upset me, of course. But I had preached for a very long time to not be beholden to one platform, to really diversify. And so it was time to put up or shut up, because back then, and the policy and the rules, of course, changed now with YouTube, but back then, you got the first strike. They delete or don't delete your stuff, but they restrict your live stream privileges for 90 days. Well, this was in October. So you think about it, you do the math. That pretty much shut me down until like the middle of SHOT Show. I couldn't go live. So I scrambled around. I thought, what am I going to do? So at that point I said, well, let's do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and I can't do the live stream, obviously. Some people go to a B channel and they do other things like that. I didn't want to mess with that. I thought, well, what I'm going to do at this point is I'll just shut down the Next Generation, which was a Wednesday podcast. I'll shut down the Thursday podcast. Then I will take and I'll move the MOA Monday podcast over to the Instagrams, which I've since learned to absolutely love that. It's a different platform, different vibe, just very engaging. I'll move that to Instagram, and then I'll turn the Firearm Friday podcast into a produced version, a produced podcast. So produce it and just upload it. And so that's what I did and rolled along until SHOT Show. SHOT Show happened in the middle of SHOT Show last year. They lifted that ban, and I could do live again. But I hadn't done live in like 90 days. Not really. I'd been doing the Instagram, but I really hadn't been doing anything anywhere else. And so I didn't really want to rush into it too much, and I didn't want to go back to 4 nights a week doing live. I just really didn't. I wanted to be able to concentrate on some other things. And so at that point, I decided, well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep the Firearm Friday podcast as pre-recorded and uploaded, just produced content. And we had some issues with the Wednesday with the youth show because you were dealing with these youth shooting sports competitors. During the summer, it's pretty easy to get them on the shows and do things, but during school, they're kids, right? They have they have curfews, they have chores to do, they have practice and school things, events going on, and all kinds of other things. So I found it kind of difficult to keep that booked and keep the topics going all year long, week in and week out. So I thought, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that one and I'll record those during the summer. And then August is, of course, the National Shooting Sports Month. So I said, well, I'll record those during the summer, and then I'll start releasing those so that they kind of so that National Shooting Sports Month kind of falls in the middle of that podcast series. And I'll just do seasons every year of that. And I'll do them on YouTube as a YouTube premiere, so people out there in the chats, they can actually chat while it's going on if somebody wants to do that. Or they can download the podcast version, listen in the car, however they want to do it. So I said, okay, I'm going to do that. And then I had a lot of people that wanted the live version of Firearm Friday. So what we did, I think, coming out of NRA, the NRA show, is we took Firearm Friday and decided, okay, what we're going to do with it now is we're going to leave the produced, uploaded version week in and week out. But every second Friday of the month, what we're going to do is we're going to bring back somebody that's been on the produced version, and we're going to do a live a live show with them, just once a month, 12 a year as it would be, and do that way. That way people get a chance maybe to follow up because they listen to that podcast. Maybe there's people out there that were listening that were thinking about questions and things going on during that podcast, and they would like to ask that particular guest. So it gives the audience a chance to participate after they've kind of heard a little bit about that guest, which is kind of cool. And then finally, everybody out there seems to love what we call the nerd chat, the after hours, the Thursday night chat, and so I eventually had to bring it back as well. So I'm up to, my workload is not any less than it was honestly doing four lives a week. If anything, with the recording and producing and stuff like that, it could actually be a little more. But yeah, that's a little bit of how it's over the last couple of years. It's kind of morphed and moved around, and you just got to kind of keep it fresh and roll with the punches and do what you got to do.
What do you prefer?
As far as platform,
Yeah, doing live, produced.
or doing, honestly, I prefer the produced. I think at this point, I would not have told you that pre-ban or pre whatever you want to call it, pre-strike. Probably wouldn't have told you that. Probably would have told you I love the live. As far as my end, now joining in with other people, I like the live. But as far as the facilitation and all of that, I like the pre-recorded because I've got my topics down. I've got control. It's just one person. I don't have to necessarily worry about the chat. We can cover everything because, like on the Fire and Friday podcast, I've kind of got a flow that I go through. I try to keep it as casual and organic of a conversation as I can possibly make it, because that's the point, is to get people out there to kind of know these guests on a different level. Anybody can come on and say, hey, I sell X product and it's this cost and these are the dimensions and blah, 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 blah. Or, hey, I work for this organization and this all the stuff that we're doing, blah, 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 blah. But to get people's backstory and background and what did they do before they worked for the company or organization that they work for now, and what do they do in their spare time, and what are their feelings on the Second Amendment? When did they become kind of aware of the Second Amendment and what it really meant and that sort of thing? So we can kind of dive into more of the personal aspect of those guests. But yeah, I mean, I do like that. If it's me being the host, I do kind of prefer the produced. And that's simply, like I said, because of control. But I absolutely love joining in live streams like this one with you tonight, or earlier on the Ghost Tactical and all of that good stuff. Get along a lot with gun websites and a bunch of different folks out there, and it's fun.
Ghost and G-Webs are great people. Chris Shoemate wants to know, what is your thoughts on YouTube versus Gun Streamer?
Gun Streamer is, unfortunately, and this falls into, I'm on full 32, by the way. Not a lot of people can say that, but we are. Those platforms are great. I'm very happy that they exist. They certainly give us a backup and an archive and that sort of stuff. One of the drawbacks with both of those platforms is the lack of options. The lack of options with analytics really sucks, especially if you're working from the industry side of things and you need to be looking at some metrics to kind of figure out what's going on. It also sucks from the analytics side as a creator when you're trying to figure out, okay, what type of content are people out there wanting, right? Because there's kind of a mixture. Some people, or I do it in kind of a mixture. Some people go out and they just do the content they want to do, period, bar none. It's whatever makes them happy, whatever thoughts are on their mind at the time, and whatever they're into. Then there's other people that they analyze it to death, and they really go too heavy into the analytics and stuff like that. And they cater specifically, all they do is cater to what the audience out there might want. I try to kind of do a mixture because it would get really old not being able to do what I want to do the vast majority of the time. So the vast majority of the time, I'm doing what I want to do. Thankfully, there's a lot of viewers and listeners and followers out there that feel the same way and like that kind of stuff. But occasionally, you get requests and you see trends and certain topics that, you may just, or items or gear or whatever, that you just have to cover that kind of stuff. You have to talk about that. And it's not that I necessarily want to, but you've got so many in the space that it's nice to have um, a large number of different insights and perspectives and opinions on subjects, because it aggravates me to no extent when I see some other creators out there, and their channels, they can do what they want to do, their audience, they can speak to them however they want to, but they're not intellectually honest with people. They don't tell the whole story. They don't tell both sides, and that aggravates me. So sometimes I got to come out, and I do it in as nice a way as possible. You don't see any. I don't think you'll find any call out videos and things like that on my channel. I don't know if I've done any. I don't think I have. Not majorly, calling people out and things like that. But things like that do aggravate me, and I usually have to make some kind of a video in response. But I try to generalize it when I do, because I want people to take it to heart. I'm not complaining and griping necessarily about that particular creator or that particular person. It's just the ideas or how they conveyed it or the wordage they're using or something like that I don't agree with. I'm not saying, they're trash people.
All right, let's go to G Webs. He has a question for you. He says, what percent of total effort would you guys suggest a content creator devote to tech know-how and growth in the tools of the trade?
Close to half would be mine. Close to half.
I would agree with that.
I wouldn't go as far as a half, but I mean close. You're between 40 and 50%, I would say. If you want to be effective, and it's like I said, that the question that was brought up about gun streamers and stuff like that, you have to diversify. You have to. You never know when, like in my position, when you're going to get a channel strike or you're going to have something happen. And different people on different platforms, they like them for different reasons, right? I mean, there's people that absolutely don't use Facebook, that absolutely don't use Twitter, that absolutely don't use Instagram. But then on the same flip side of that, there's people that's all they use. So if you want the maximum reach and to spread out as far as wide as you possibly can, you're going to have to know as many of these platforms as you possibly can get on, and you're going to kind of have to learn the intricacies of how they work, and it's sad to say, but to get around policies, and that's one thing I don't really want to dive off into necessarily too deep, unless, of course, John, you want to explore that. But, with some of this idea when you're talking about these platforms that, they're so biased, they hate conservatives, or they hate guns, or they hate this, or they hate that. And if you step back and you look at these platforms and how huge they are, YouTube, out of YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube obviously being the behemoth, the giant elephant in the room, it's the day-to-day management of something like that from a tech side, and John, I know you're in the tech side too a little bit, is mind-boggling for the people that understand how all that stuff operates. So to pin that on them and say, okay, it's just straight-up bias, is wrong. Does the bias exist? Sure, it's going to exist. Anytime you got a large company, you're going to have rogue employees and people in positions of power that may abuse power because of their political beliefs or something like that. Yes, that can happen. But by and large, a lot of what we see is manipulations of the platform, because that certainly happens, and these big platforms spend many hours and resources and many dollars to try to combat stuff like that. But whether it's manipulation or it's machine learning or glitches in the system or whatever, there's going to be things that happen. So having that diversity. And then the next thing about the diversity is that gets you into a mode to where you're kind of comfortable no matter the platform, right? You understand the broader sense of tech. You understand, and you're not afraid to go sign up for that new account and jump on that new platform. And that's critical and that's vital, because basically one word, or is it two? But MySpace, right? Say MySpace nowadays, and the young people are going to go, what are you talking about? What? MySpace. AOL, nobody remembers AOL or Yahoo chat rooms and things like that. Nobody remembers that stuff, but that was huge back in the day, right? And eventually the big platforms we see nowadays, I get it, they're huge and this, that, and the other, and blah, 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 but they're going to die out, and there's going to be something new and trendy that comes along and pops up, and the quicker you can get onto those things, and they do become trendy and pop up, you're one of the first ones on that platform. So you've kind of got a leg up when it comes to subscribership and reach and being a big voice and a big deal on said platform like that.
Yeah. I would agree with you on that. That's why right now I'm broadcasting to 10 different locations on this. But one thing I do want to know from you is why are you all about that Fud Life?
All about the Bud Light.
You can probably guess where that came from.
Right? Yeah, that was G-Webs. He's already dripping me on that. Well, so I'm sick and tired. I got sick and tired. It has to do with the infighting and the name calling and the bickering and the other stuff that goes on. And for far too long, people would take, you've got what basically came out of the kind of happened around the revolt, the NRA revolt, right? That was back in G-Web is going to kill me on this. But what was that, 77 or 72?
Close.
Or I don't know. It was in the
No.
70s, right? But anyway, so FUD kind of came around in that time, the word FUD. And nowadays, oh my God, it's been warped and twisted so much that, people will talk about somebody that actively goes against the Second Amendment, right? It's not done out of ignorance or they don't know or whatever. I mean, they actively, are trying to restrict our rights or are on board with it. It's not that they don't care. That was the thing at first was like, okay, well, you got these FUDs, and as long as they've got their hunting rifles, they don't pay attention. They don't care. They just go hunting, and they've got their stuff to go hunting with, and they're not paying attention to restrictions on machine guns or NFA-related items or bump stocks or whatever it might be. And that's kind of morphed into that, somebody will say, well, I think that, we need to ban all quote unquote assault rifles. And people will say, "Oh, he's just a FUD." No, he's not. He's an anti-gunner. He's not. Let's don't parse words and don't put that on him. He's an anti-gunner, and it aggravated me because I know people that truly are FUDs. I grew up a FUD, and I think that the vast majority, if not all, gun owners, 2A activists, advocates, and everything else were at one time probably a FUD. They weren't aware of the significance, the relevance of the Second Amendment. Therefore, they were a FUD, and so by lumping people that they duck hunt, they go to church on Sunday and Wednesdays, they work 12 to 16 hours a day, they may pay their dues to the the GOA or the NRA or whoever, and they're ignorant, they're just not aware. That's a totally different class of people than somebody that's actively going after your rights. So yeah, if we're I hate labels, but if we're going to apply labels, we need to apply them accurately. And in thinking about this, and the more it aggravated me and the more it got on my nerves because I knew that it wasn't accurate. And I was like, okay, how do I explain this? How do I talk to people and get them to start using FUD correctly? I want to take back FUD. And so in taking back FUD, I thought, okay, thug life, right? We're kind of familiar with thug life. Yeah. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to do FUD life. And I'm going to do the Y instead of the I in the life, and do FUD life, and I'm going to start to take it back, and started a little progression on that, and got to looking into, which was pretty astounding. I knew that through the NRA stuff and all of that back in the 70s, and that's when the word FUD was kind of applied to some gun owners, and it come from Elmer Fudd. We know that. I mean, anybody that watched cartoons as a kid, they get that.
Who's Elmer Fudd?
Right, exactly.
No. No, seriously.
You don't know?
No.
Really?
No, I'm just joking.
What?
I know.
What?
I know who Elmer Fudd is.
Don't tell me you've never watched Looney Tunes. That's communist, man. I'll take the chat off with that, man. Come on. But no, anyway, so I thought, okay, well, we all know that's where that come from, but why did they use that for Elmer Fudd? Is what I got to wonder. And I thought, why do they call him Elmer Fudd? Was that just a made up name? Did somebody that was drawing a cartoon said, oh, this guy needs to be named Elmer? What's the last name? Oh, Fudd. And I thought, there's got to be a reason behind that. It's got to be. So I started doing some research,
You
and
researched why his name was
I
Elmer Fudd.
researched the word FUD
Were
and
you
everything.
were
Is
you
kind of
bored?
what I did. That's where I went with it. I actually researched the word FUD a little bit, and then that kind of led me into why Elmer Fudd is named Elmer Fudd. Elmer Fudd has basically the root of the word FUD is just spelled with one D, and it's Scottish. And it's basically a person that does things out of sheer ignorance, regardless of what people warn him about stuff or whatever. He goes off and does it anyway. So it's somebody that's oblivious, somebody that's ignorant, somebody that's oblivious. So once you know that, and you kind of see, you're like, okay, Elmer Fudd fits that bill because Bugs Bunny's going to tie his gun barrel in a knot and he pulls the trigger anyway, knowing it's going to blow up. I mean, you know, he knows when he goes after Daffy Duck or whoever that he's going to, end up on the short end of the stick every time or whatever. But yet he keeps going over and over and over again to hunt the wabbits when he knows the wabbits are going to get over on him. And so once you know that there's an element of ignorance and obliviousness involved in FUD, then that opens a door. And so what we need to do is we need to understand that there's a lot of people out there when it comes to gun ownership, when it comes to the Second Amendment, that there's a lot of people out there that are ignorant and oblivious. And I challenge everybody out there to be intellectually honest with yourself and think about it. And there probably is a time that you were that way. I know I certainly was. So again, it's FUD life because at one time I think we were all FUDs, and more so than that, I think that there is potentially times that we can become FUDs again. I don't think that FUDism, if you want to use that as a term, I don't think that's something that once you become a hardened 3%er or a gun rights activist or anything like that, I don't think that completely goes away. I think that's something that's that ignorance and obliviousness is something that's always there. It's something that it's a darkness, if you will, that you can always slip back into. Maybe not completely, but on certain subjects and certain topics and certain pieces of legislation and certain things like that, I believe that we all have the capacity to become a FUD again in a way.
Yeah, I actually started advocating for the Second Amendment before I owned a gun. Because of advocating for all of the amendments, and I was looking at them, and I was like, which one's most in danger? I was like, Second Amendment.
Right.
So,
Yep.
so yeah. Even though back in the day, back in college, I was like, I don't need a gun. I was still very, very pro 2A. Against
Well, you're still a
NFA.
FUD. You're still a FUD because you said you didn't need a gun. It's not about what you need.
True.
Right.
That
So
is
there you
true.
go. So see, FUD life applies, man.
Oh, damn it.
I can make it apply to
I'm a
anybody.
FUD.
So that's my challenge. But no, I mean I get you. Yeah, there's people out there that certainly do. I agree with you on the Second Amendment, and I mean there's a reason that's the one. It has nothing to do with the guns, right? There's a reason that they go after that one. It's because if you topple that, everything else is a gravy train.
Exactly.
It's a gravy train. I mean, look at the first, which the first is extremely important. I contend that I think the founders, I think the only reason they put the first before the second was that they didn't want to seem too extreme. I think honestly that's why they put the first before the second. They didn't want it might have scared people if they talked about arms and militias and things like that right out of the gate, right off the bat. So to me the first is under such an assault, and honestly they all are. Probably the only one that I talk about this all the time. Good Lord, I hate the 17th Amendment. Absolutely hate it. So
Why do you
yes,
hate
there
it
are.
so much?
Do what?
Why do you hate it so much?
It goes against the founding. It goes against the founding of the country and the checks and balances and the system that was put in play. It perverted the system majorly. And for those out there, just I said 17th Amendment, heads exploded. People are Googling, and the data centers around the world are going off with people trying to figure it out. So let me explain. That's the popular election of senators. So yeah, before that, the states basically had control of the Senate, right? The states got to pick their representation for the Senate. Well, that did a couple things. First of all, by proxy, because if you were paying attention at the local level at your state, if you're paying attention at your local level, you're being a good steward of the civic process and everything else, then your state was gonna act in a way that they were gonna send a senator that probably represented your beliefs anyway. But the thing is, the senators had the preservation of the states and the sovereignty of the states and all of that stuff as a higher priority over the House, because the House is the direct connection to the people themselves. So it's that balance. It balanced things out. Well, they passed the 17th, and now every senator is elected the same way as a House member as the representatives, and it's all one big hodgepodge. There's no longer like two tiers or a back and forth or a balance there, and that's been detrimental to states' rights. I think I'm firmly convinced that that's one of the reasons that we have such a hard time with federal overreach is there wasn't a proper Senate, and I say proper Senate, meaning that the way that the founders wanted that structure set up, is that there hasn't been a proper Senate in place to protect those states' rights for many, many years.
Yeah, I don't like the 16th Amendment myself.
Everybody has the one, I think. Everybody comes in. It's not the first or the second usually, but everybody has at least one, I think.
16th is income tax.
Yeah. The argument for that I hear a lot of times too is, and how do we get off on this? We got totally off the gun chat. That's fine, but
this is my chat, man. It can go any direction.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I mean, the argument a lot of times is that, well, what would we do for roads and what would we do for fire departments and sheriffs and this, that, and the other. And it's like, you do realize that we had all that stuff before we had income tax, right? So
yeah, well, roads and fire departments and sheriffs and stuff are usually local taxes. And I hate when people say that. It's like, well, the only type of roads is interstates, but every other road that you drive on is all local taxes. So income tax has nothing to do with that.
Well, the interstates change from one state to another. Mm-hmm. I live in Texas, and we got pretty good roads for the most part, but I can drive down I-20 at the second I hit the Louisiana border, and I'm on an interstate, I'm on I-20. Second I hit the Louisiana border, it's not the same I-20.
Yeah.
So something's going on there. I don't know what.
The federal government gives the money from income tax to, they give federal funds to the states.
Subsidizing,
to repair the interstates, and however the states use that, that's where you see the big difference.
Well, and that speaks to the law enforcement you talk about, the fire departments, the other things like that, the other civil servants and infrastructure and things of that nature. Is a lot of the taxes, they do go to subsidize that, but why couldn't that be done on the state level? Property taxes, oh good Lord, if we're going to talk about taxes, don't even get me started on property taxes. Here in Texas, that's a very sore subject.
Yeah, it's a sore subject to me too, because I believe once you buy something that's yours, you shouldn't have to keep on paying it, because do you really own it if you have to keep on paying a fee on it every year to keep it, and if you don't pay it, they take it away from you? Is it ever really yours?
Is it ever really yours? Exactly right. Yeah. And there's ways around the tax game. There's lots of ideas that's been floated over many, many years for the whole tax game and everything else. And some of them are good, some of them not so good. Some of them need a little more baking time. But I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess it depends on where you live. Now, where you're at, we don't have a state income tax. Do you have a state income tax?
We have a state income tax, yes.
You do? Okay. Yeah, that kind of sucks. I mean, on top of a federal, anyway, it sucks.
Yeah, we pay quite a bit of taxes. Not as much as my in-laws, my like sister-in-law and stuff, who lives up in New York. Their tax rate is insane.
Oh yeah, I imagine. Like I said, in Texas, I mean, we that gets made up, and a lot of people say, well, there's not a state income tax in Texas. But like I said, I can't harp enough about the property taxes. I see Ghost Tactical out in the chat talking about the property taxes in Texas now. And even though we don't have a state income tax, I think our property tax system more than makes up for it
Yeah.
compared to a lot of other states.
It looks like Ghost Tactical is agreeing with you on that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
they're gonna get there some one way or the other.
Right.
Just how they take the blood from the stone.
Well, I don't have a problem. And I don't know, this may be controversial or whatever, but I don't have a problem with taxes. I don't have a problem with kicking in to help fund infrastructure and for things that we utilize or have at our disposal on a regular basis. Public works and public servants and things of that nature. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. The problem is when you deal with a system. Well, there's property taxes, right, which is extremely hard on the wealthy, or you're talking about income taxes, which is extremely hard on the middle class. I have a problem when taxes aren't applied equally across the board, right? Um, we need a system where it really doesn't matter, and that's where something like a national sales tax. Um, and I'm not completely sold on that idea, so don't think I'm 100% on board or I'm advocating for it. But it's an intriguing idea, and it's intriguing first of all, because you're going to get more people onto paying into that system. I mean, look at all the people that are maybe their own government assistants, right? Maybe they're working off the books. Maybe it's illegal means and they're making huge money off the books, right? But they're buying big screen TVs and luxury items and Cadillac Escalades and 28-inch wheels and all of this other stuff they're out there buying. They could be paying in the system. They could be paying a federal tax on that. And at least we're getting something from the people that are not currently not contributing. Now, with that said, there has to be some type. I think with more people paying in, I think that there has to be a relinquishment of things like some property taxes and, the progressive income tax rates and some of the other taxes that we have. I don't at all support a national sales tax on top of the system we've got now. I think it needs to be completely tore down, revamped, and maybe a national sales tax be a part of the new structure.
Yeah, I mean, I would trade the current structure for a national sales tax if we got rid of the taxes. Rand Paul actually had an idea where it involved the national sales tax and got rid of a bunch of other taxes, and basically all you would need is a postcard to do your taxes every year. And the more you spend, the more money you pay.
Right.
That got rejected. Since we're off into politics, I saw I saw something interesting today. I'm not sure how political you are or not, but AOC said she wants to abolish prisons.
Oh, I vaguely have heard that. Yeah. Did she ever figure out what the garbage disposal was for before she tackles the prison system? Maybe she
Probably
needs to
not.
figure that out first. But I don't know. She's one of those people that I don't. Sometimes I don't believe people can say. I said this before. I mean, there's an old TV series that maybe some people out there are old enough to know what I'm talking about, called "Kids Say the Darndest Things." And I mean, you could literally. There's probably a channel or something out there now that does it. That politicians say the darndest things because I think they try to one up each other on the idiocy of their statements. But yeah, she says a lot of off the wall things. But I don't know that part of that is not. I mean, she's intentionally saying off the wall things. Um, with her rise and the way she came up, and according to what I've heard, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, John, and anybody out there in the chats or listening later in the comments below. Correct me if I'm wrong, but some of my research and what I've heard is she was kind of brought to the forefront through almost like a lottery system or a scholarship system through a bunch of donors, big like tech donors out of California and other places. And that that really reeks of somebody being handled, right? Somebody having handlers. And I'm not real sure that it's like, well, we spent all this money on this person and we want her to get as much airtime as possible. So, we're going to kind of script and get her to say wild and crazy things.
Well, she was what they did. We'll get back to the 2A topics in a
Yeah, I
minute.
definitely want to. Well, I definitely want to come back to the prison issue itself too. So let's put a pin in that. But go ahead.
No, she did what was called primarying. Uh, they found a district where she could win in the primaries and knock off the current unpopular person in the primaries. And it's a heavily Democratic district, so it was going to go Democrat no matter what. So they moved her in there because that's where she can win at. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't. She originally did not live in that district until the primaries.
Right, but have you heard that she was kind of picked among several people to do that?
Yeah, they did. They moved up a bunch of different people. It was not really the tech people so much. Soros had a hand in it. It was a bunch of the.
Oh, I'm sure.
It was a bunch of the people like that.
Yeah. No, I'm sure he did.
I know Soros is like the boogeyman, but he did give the majority of the money to have that happen.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, everything I've read, heard, everything else, he seems like a pretty despicable individual.
Well, he's banned from his home country.
Right. Yeah. But back to the prison thing. I mean, her talking about getting rid of prisons or banning prisons. That's taken everything to an extreme from my thought. But there's certainly. I mean, I don't know that anybody can disagree that we need some type of prison reform or our justice system. Our justice system from top to bottom.
100%.
It's the best in the world. Don't get me wrong. I think it is, but it could use some work. It could use some overhauling and some revamp. One thing that I see that we do here in Texas that I think works fairly well is the self-sufficiency. And I'm sure other states have systems that do that too. But man, I mean, there's units here that produce trailers. I mean, they build trailers and they do this and do that. So I mean, you're talking about marketable skills. You're talking about that helps lessen the taxpayer burden on people that are incarcerated. But you can't talk about the prison system itself without talking about the justice system and sending people away. You're talking about where the punishment doesn't fit the crime, and that happens both ways. We have people that murder people and get 5 years. We have people that get caught with pot and serve 10. Well, you tell me how that makes any sense at all, right?
It doesn't.
And where's the problem there? I mean, I don't know. It's too complex of a situation for us to figure out on this show tonight. But some of it is activist judges that sit on the bench. I mean, there's no doubt. Some of it is, activist DAs. Some of it is just people have a bad day. That judge has had a bad day for whatever reason. He got up and him and his wife had a fight before he went to sit on the bench and hear 3 or 4 cases that day, and all those people received heavier sentences than the day before or the day after. I mean, it's crazy, but I think the and maybe I'm crazy for thinking this, but I think that if we exercised a little more personal responsibility, if we exercised a little more, or had the capability rather, with the federal government and a lot of the state governments and municipal and county governments too, but if we was able to exercise a little more freedom and liberty, and took a little bit of personal responsibility, I think that um, the prison population system would work itself out, because I think a vast majority of those people that in there rather, um, are very small time, very small fish. It's really stupid. It's really stupid things that are in what's the word? Inconsequential?
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe that's not a word, but that sounds right anyway.
that is. Let's get back to the 2A thing and keeping with the courts. Uh, the actually, you know what? I want to go talk to you about the GRPC before we get into that. You had the
Uh oh.
GRPC and you filmed a lot of it.
Almost all of it. I
Yeah.
would have been all of it had I not. I lost some footage somehow. So I don't know how that happened, but over the course of the 3 days and transferring files back and forth and doing something, I've ended up. I've
Obama.
realized I've lost about maybe 3 hours
Obama.
of footage. Yeah, it's the Russians. The Russians hacked me. That's what I think anyway. And probably Biden was in on it. If I was yeah, probably. Um, but yeah, I did, and I've gotten most of that's out on the channel at this point. Most of it, some very good speeches, some very good ideas in some of those speeches. Some things that people really need to consider and circulate around. Maybe, like I said, refine those ideas and see what we can do. Fling them at the wall and see if they stick.
Who impressed you the most at GRPC? Speech
Man, that's
wise.
a good question. Who impressed me the most? Man, you can put me on the spot.
My good friend was out there, by the way.
Who was that?
Maj.
Oh, Mosh. Yeah, yeah. But Mosh didn't speak.
No, he didn't
So
speak, but no, he
I
was
did get
just
to
out
hang
there.
out with Maj.
Yeah,
We
he's a cool guy.
even though he apparently shops in the same section of Walmart I do, um, because yeah, he showed up with the Golden Girls shirt and a Deadpool shirt. That yeah, and I had my Scooby Doo's and Super Mario Brothers and Rugrats. But um, man, I don't know. That's such a tough one. There's so many. Um, Johnny Rowland comes to mind. And that's just because I had him on the podcast here, the Final Friday podcast here, last Friday or whenever it was. Um, and we went a little more in depth about this concept or idea. But what impressed me about that was outside of the box thinking, and the concept of wagering on shooting sports events, and how that could get more people interested in the the Second Amendment by proxy in a way.
Definitely could. I saw that. I totally agree with him on that one. It sounds like a crazy idea, and it's an off the wall idea, but I think it is an idea that would actually work.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Think about wagering happens on baseball in baseball right now, right?
Hmm.
Well, think about how that sector would react if Major League Baseball said, "Oh, we can't have bats anymore over so many ounces because they're just too deadly," right? Because we all know beatings happen every year, and the vast majority of these beatings or whatever are done with a bat that's heavier than whatever the ounce is, right? So we've got to limit. We've got to have a ban on all bats over so many ounces. Man, how's that going to affect the game? And if that affects the game, how's that going to affect all the sports wagering? And those people are upset at that point. So, yeah, if we had a situation that, that could foster that type of an alignment, then, yeah, I think it would be a net plus. And then the other big thing is just getting it out in the forefront. I mean, you talk about. I've talked to several people before. I have a few friends even that have shot competitively worldwide, and you go to other countries and you go into a pub or a restaurant or whatever, and there's shooting sports on the TV. You don't see that kind of thing around here. You don't see that kind of thing in the U.S. and firearms and shooting and all of that is at a completely different level. Even with the current regulations and everything that we've got, is at a completely different level in this country. Yet you don't see it like you do in other countries.
Yeah, that is correct. Um, there is a really good shooting team out of Spain, though, I will say. But they're all Spanish cops.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they came over here to compete, and they did a bang up job.
What type of competition was it?
It was a three gun competition.
Oh,
It wasn't like professional three gunners against them. It was police departments competing against each other.
okay. Well,
For
there's like a league or a thing that revolves around that, though, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember off the top of my head what the one that I'm familiar with, what it's called, but yeah, they actually, yeah, departments compete. It's pretty cool.
yeah. I did a story today about a story out of Florida. Florida is always crazy. Well, it's against Florida law. It's a felony for police departments to make list of gun owners, like a list of gun owners and like what guns they own and stuff like that. There is in Charlotte County, Florida. They basically did that. What they did is they used the pawn system. When somebody pawned a gun for a short-term loan, when they took it back, they kept the gun owner's name, the type of gun, and the serial number, and periodically ran checks against that to make sure they didn't commit any felonies or crimes that would take away their rights. And if they did, they would investigate to see if they still owned the gun. Sounds like a gun
Whoa,
registry, right?
whoa. That
Yeah.
sounds like
Yeah.
that's what that is.
So I contacted the AG in the local department, and I got a comment back from them,
Uh huh.
and they acknowledged my story up on Amaland. They said yes, the emails contained the gun, the serial, and the gun owner's information, because they stored it in a huge email file, right?
Yeah.
But
Right.
we think it is of no consequence that that email be retained, and it's not a list.
Okay. That's not accurate, but okay.
Yeah. What do you call a bunch of names with contact information, the firearm, and the serial numbers all in rows and columns?
Yeah.
So
Well,
I saw some of the leaked emails, and it was just like, that's a damn
well,
list.
I guess not to pull out the Bill Clinton, but I guess it depends on what your definition of a list is, right?
Yeah, so I just want to throw that out there. Anyone, my article's up on Ammo Land. I don't care if you take it and write your own article about it or if you plagiarize me. I'm just trying to get it out there because that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Now, is that in what you've in what you've uncovered or found out so far? Does that sound like a rogue type thing that was done, or was that from dissemination on high, or what are your
No, no,
thoughts on
no.
that?
It came from okay. The department did it. The AG's office reviewed it, and they're the ones who said, "Nope, it's not a list. It's just a bunch of names, serial numbers, what they have."
So they condoned it essentially.
They basically condoned it. Florida Carry, I think, is getting ready to sue them over it
Good. They need to be.
because that
Yeah.
is they want an independent They give them 72 hours to respond, and they're asking for an independent investigator because that is definitely
Well,
not right.
this goes back, and not to take it back into politics, but this goes back into why people need to be so vigilant. You know, your the most local form of government is the one that's going to screw you over the worst if you're not vigilant. And people need to be paying attention and voting in people. You know, if they had people were voting in people at that city or county or whatever that hires those officers or hires those chiefs, or they elect those sheriffs, or whatever the case may be, would that have happened if they were paying attention and doing that and getting, pro 2A, pro liberty, pro freedom people at the local level? Probably not.
Yeah, and the thing is, they didn't respond to like Florida Carry about it.
Well, they'll have to respond when they file a suit. So
Yeah,
let them sue the crap out of them. That's man, that's horrible.
yeah. It was so shocking when they came back and said it's not a list. It's just rows and columns. What?
That's
Like
yeah
that's a
okay
list.
yeah. It's like yeah, it's not a hamburger. It's just some meat in the bun. Well, that's a hamburger. Sorry.
Yeah, I just thought it was ridiculous. I wanted to get your opinion on that.
On what?
On like rogue attorney generals backing up police departments that are obviously breaking the law to compile data on gun owners.
That's wrong. I mean, that's an easy answer on that. Is that that's wrong. Now, how do we deal with that other than suing the crap out of them?
I found out the list goes back to 2013 as well.
Oh my God, can you imagine? No, there's no telling. How big is it? Did it say?
No, it's every gun that's been pawned in Charlotte County since 2013, though.
Yeah,
So I
that's
don't know.
probably a lot.
I'm filing a bunch of Freedom of Information Act to see if they've acted on any other arrest,
Right.
or what.
Doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
of how big the
Yeah.
list is. I'm pretty sure they have because they had people going through it every day,
Yeah.
running
It
serial numbers
doesn't
and running
matter.
names.
It doesn't matter how big it is. It doesn't matter whether or not they've acted on it. Um, just the fact that they have that compiled and they're keeping that is grounds for a suit. Um, how do we deal with that? It gets a lot of these state attorney generals have a whole lot of power. And really, the only, again, I go back to the only shielding you've got from higher levels of government is at your local level. And particularly a sheriff wields quite a bit of shielding power, if you will.
Hmm.
And so, people will go and they'll say, well, so this happened in Florida, so let's recall the attorney general or let's vote out the attorney general. And I think that's a backwards approach. Yes, I think that ultimately needs to be done, but I think more emphasis needs to be put on getting rid of the the city councilman that put that department together, the sheriff that was over that department, and getting that local mess and local corruption and local um, I don't even know. I don't even know the word for those types of people. But get those people cleaned up, cleaned out. Get them out of there. Get some good people in, and then that's going to give you a little more. I think a little more clout to go to be able to go after those attorney generals at that point. So I think we got to work this from the bottom up, and not that many people are thinking that way. Unfortunately, they see. Mainly federal politicians, in the nightly news, just day in and day out, and all the retweets and the hashtags and the Facebook posts and the things like that that come down the pipe are all from major, federal politicians. So they've got it in their mind that we go after the federal level, and I think that's backwards. I think we in this country um, we're supposed to hold power from the ground up, right? It starts with the people and it goes up, and we make changes the same way.
Yeah, it's we the people, not we the government. Or
Exactly.
you the government. Chris Shoemake says, my firearm identifies as not a gun, which gives me an idea. What I can do if I move to Florida ever is I'm going to get myself a machine gun and say, it's not a machine gun. It's just a tool that fires bullets very, very rapidly.
Right. Right. And if you ever got in a pickle, you could, the way laws are going now, I guess you could, I don't know, say you were common law married to your machine gun. So it's not a machine. It's like, that's my wife, man. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. There's all sorts of stories I'm working on that today I got hit with a bunch of stories, and they're all just as ridiculous as that from
There,
from different
it's
states, and it's like really scary. how do we convince people to get involved locally to defend their rights locally?
It takes, sadly, we live in such a world of tech and such a world of disconnect. Um, Sadly, that is a $64,000 question. Um, and it's going to require personal conversations. It's going to require personal connections. It's going to require personal relationships. It's going to require you actually getting out and getting involved in your community. That may be serving as a poll judge. That may be serving as a chairman for whatever political party you might be affiliated with. That may mean going to school board meetings, city council meetings, PTA meetings, and not just going, but going and broadcasting that stuff. That could be huge. I mean, the era of the citizen journalist, which I mean, in a aggrandized way. I mean, you and I both are kind of, that's what we are in a way.
I'm paid.
Well, depending on what you're doing and stuff, yeah.
Yeah,
But
I'm
you're
not paid
not.
for this, but I'm paid
You're
for
not.
writing.
You're not quote unquote legacy media. You're not
No.
Fox, ABC. That sort of stuff, and that's my point. Um, but yeah, the era of cell phone footage and things like that go up that expose things and all of that is upon us. And so I would encourage people to go out, be a part of your community. Don't be rude, don't be hateful when you show up to those meetings, but record them and throw them up on Facebook or Twitter or the YouTubes or the whatever, and then share that stuff around and tell people in your community. Right? Don't just share it and then on social media and forget about it, but share it on social media, and then the next day when you're in the grocery store and half a dozen people stop you to say hi, say, hey, did you know there was a city council meeting last night? No, or yeah, or no, or whatever. Well, did you go? No, I did. Well, hey, jump on my Facebook. Check it out. They talked about this, they talked about that, and try to spark and encourage interest, and make it easy at first for people. If you can make it easy it's that bait, it's that enticement. And if you can make it easy, and social media and the technology we have certainly makes things easy. And if you can make it easy for people to start to consume that, then at some point, as they gain interest in everything else, they'll seek that out themselves. It's kind of like, one of my favorite places to eat is Genghis Grill, and there was one just a town or two over here. It was fairly easy to go there and eat, and blah blah blah. You can't find one for nothing anymore. But anytime I travel, what am I doing? I seek it out. I'm actually looking and going, okay, does this city got to have a Genghis Grill? Because if it does, I'm going to stop in there and eat. So, it was easy at first for me to get that. And I was like, wow, this is good stuff. I love it. So now I seek it out. And I think we have to use that same approach, or kind of instill that same approach. We have to kind of lead them along a little bit at first, and then they'll take off and go on their own and go and record their own things and have their own interactions. And that's how you build a true organic grassroots army.
Yeah, Chris Shoemake wants to know how they're going to determine the price for the buybacks. From what I understand from Beto's idea is the minimum that you would get is $100. The maximum you would get is $300. No matter how much your firearm is worth, $300 is the cap.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Maj talking about like getting involved and standing up for what you believe in. Maj has a saying. He says, he's always hearing people say, "Oh, if they ban these guns or they have a gun buyback, I'm just gonna say I lost all mine in a boating accident."
Right.
Maj goes, if they ban all these guns, or if they say they're gonna have a buyback, I'm not gonna say I lost mine in a boating accident. I'm just gonna say, nah, you can't have them.
Yeah, they're not for sale, right? It's a buyback. It's like mine aren't for sale. Sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are you gonna do? Because you can't buy something that's not for sale, and you can't buy back something that you never owned, and that's silly. So yeah, a lot of this buyback stuff, I think it gets approached the wrong way a lot of times, and a lot of things do. We we fail, I think, as a gun community and the gun culture sometime to step back and look at bigger pictures. And one of the things I think we fail to, the bump stock thing was one of those. Oh, good Lord, the amount of people from it's bump stocks don't matter or whatever. It's like it's not about the bump stocks. Oh my God, it's about the whatever the word is there, the usurpation of powers, right? The overreach.
Yeah, listen,
And
they banned bump stocks, right? And now in Florida, they banned anything that speeds up the rate of fire of a trigger, including uh, it's a gray area, but a lot of people
well, yeah,
are not buying like match grade triggers right now in Florida because they're afraid that they're going to get charged.
yeah.
And a lot of places won't
Well,
even ship them to Florida anymore because of that.
define, and here's the problem, and this was part of, at least during the second comment period of the bump stock thing, the one that everybody fell down on, by the way. Shame on everybody out there. Um, that was one of the things that was brought up, was mentioned, is how can you possibly even have this discussion until we establish a rate of fire? If we can't establish a standard rate of fire, which you can't, that's the reason that it's one round per trigger pull, right? Is because you can't. You can't establish the rate of fire on a semi-automatic firearm. You can't. Um, but yeah, we got off on the bump stocks, and it was something. What were we talking about before that?
I don't know, man.
Oh, the buybacks. We were
Buyback,
talking
yeah.
about the buybacks. So the same as the bump stocks, and it's like, well, it was the overreach and power on the bump stock. The buyback thing, that's a personal property issue, and so when we're talking about that, we need to be mindful in the discussion, because we may be dealing with somebody on the fence, slightly left of the fence, whatever it might be. And we need to frame that in the context instead of, well, come and take it, or I shall not comply. We need to frame that in the context, or Beto can't, I hate this. Beto can't, I've heard it 1,000 times. Beto can't buy mine back because he can't pass a background check. But we need to frame it in the context of personal property and say, hey, do you own things? Do you like the things you own? Did you pay good money for the things you own? Well, what happens if, some lunatic decides to use that for mass genocide or murder tomorrow, and they decide to ban those, and here you have thousands of dollars tied up in that piece of equipment or whatever it might be, and you have to go sell it for a couple $100. It's a personal property issue. The federal government is actually charged and tasked with protecting. They're supposed to protect our rights to personal property. And here they are, they're wanting to take that away and screw us over. That's just a perverse idea from what we come full circle back to what the founders intended. The founders intended for the federal government to allow us freedom to amass property. As a matter of fact, it should have read life, liberty, and the pursuit of property, which
Yep, John Locke.
most people understand that. But part of the reason was those slavery issues and some other things that they changed that to pursuit of happiness. Well, pursuit of happiness, let's be honest, is kind of the pursuit of property. It's kind of the same thing, just a weirder way of saying it. But there's a reason that it's that way, is that we have the right to work hard, build, create, whatever our heart's desire. And we have the right to keep and own that, and nobody take that away. Nobody steal that from us. If we want to willingly engage in commerce and sell things, start a business, whatever, and sell things, that's fine. But under for a forceful pretense, the federal government's supposed to be protecting us against stuff like that,
Yeah.
not doing it themselves.
Didn't for years they told us that no one wanted to take our guns?
They've said that since day one,
And
and
now it's
anybody
like-
that's believed that since for the last, I don't know how many years, no telling. I'm sure 100 years ago somebody probably was talking about that, NFA or whatever it might be. Oh, we don't want to take your guns. Well,
Just that one.
here's the thing. Yeah,
And that one.
Um,
And that one.
so you do want to take, even like with the NFA. If it was the NFA, we don't want to take your guns. Well, if that's the kind of guns that I own, then yes, you want to take my guns. But more importantly than that, let's get off the fact it's even a gun. You want to take my property. It's like, really? It kind of comes back to the whole property tax issue we were talking about. I mean, that kind of gives them a back door in a way to be able to do something like that.
Man, I
And the
mean,
government owns, how much property does the government own in the United States anyway? It's a staggering amount of property.
like 50%.
Yeah, that the government owns. Now let that sink in if that's not scary.
Well, in the East, they don't own nearly as much as they do in the West.
Yeah, it's more populated, and then you got parks and open areas, and I understand some of the national parks and some of the other things. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but
But they
yeah,
own.
some of the stuff and I don't necessarily have a problem with state land and state park issues because again, you get back into local government and local control, and as you get further down the rung of government, I have less and less problem with power as you get lower down, as long as it's constitutionally sound anyway. I have less and less problem with power as you move on down to say the city council level. But yeah, at the federal level, there's no reason the federal government should own that kind of land. It's just ridiculous.
The power structure is flipped, I believe.
Hmm. Yeah, the pyramid is flipped on its head for sure, and it's been that way for quite some time. It's not anything new.
Yeah. Jefferson would be rolling in his grave. Yeah, one of the things that I find funny is people are like, well, when the founding fathers wrote the Second Amendment, they are only talking about muskets. And these are guys that shot people in the face because they put a tax on tea. You know, are you really sure that these guys weren't that extreme?
These guys were. I am a big fan of Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read probably anything, everything, and that he wrote and has been wrote about him. I've probably read it. And Franklin was kind of like the old geezer, kind of herding the cats in a way, a little bit, because most of the guys were fairly young. Most of our founders and framers, for the most part, but diplomatic solutions and diplomatic means were attempted for years and years and years and years. So there's this thought, and they don't teach history in school, so of course there's this thought that, oh, the British taxed the tea, so then the George Washington threw it overboard and shot everybody in the face, and the revolution started. It's like it wasn't like that, and there was way more issues than, okay, taxation without representation. I get you, that's a big one, and that's part of it.
It was, the whole tea thing. Whole tea thing was.
But there was.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, there was. I'm just saying there was tons of other things involved with it too.
Yeah, the tax on tea was retaliation against the colonies for being disobedient.
Yeah, we were quite literally the redheaded stepchild.
Yeah, and we didn't listen to the British a
lot. Just like any other colony that, of course, that you got to realize that was the most powerful military might in the world at the time. And they had and continued even after we broke free, continued to colonialize or colonize or whatever many, many parts of the world. And, nobody really had to, before us, nobody had the guts to stand up to us, and having an ocean in between us, that helped. But, realize too, there's a few things. First of all, we had help. We had allies worldwide.
The French.
We didn't do it just on our own, and that's one of the things when the silliness that goes on now about civil war and this silly notion that there's going to be an actual civil war or revolution or something that goes on, and I'm like, do you realize even back then we didn't do it on our own? But to speak to the idea that they couldn't envision muskets, well, first of all, you blow that right out of the water, and you turn it around on them and say, well, then I guess you don't have any freedom of speech if you're creating an email or talking online or whatever, right? Because there's no way they could envision the tech.
What I always bring up is that the muskets back in that day were weapons of war. They were
Right.
literally weapons of war. The public
Yeah.
had
Well,
all the arms as the military, and the public actually had better arms than the
exactly.
military.
The terminology and I think in the Heller decision that was used was common use, right? In
Hmm.
common use. Um, and you're absolutely right. A lot of people overlook that. They talk about they talk about weapons of war, and that's exactly what they meant in the Second Amendment. Make no doubt, make no mistake about it, because they use the term arms, right? If it would have been about a hunting rifle, they would have probably said rifle or long gun or long arm or something like that. They said arms, and at the time there was people during that time that owned battleships,
Hmm.
cannons, all kinds of crazy things that would be equivalent to battleships nowadays, or jets or tanks or rockets or anything else. So um, the but you're absolutely right about that. Was actually one of the things that was, I think anyway, in some of the reading and research and other things I've done in the Revolutionary War, I think that's actually one of the things that was in our favor. Is the um, we had far more accurate firearms. We had far more accurate arms um, than the British. They were used to that,
The smooth
European
war.
style battlefield fighting and stuff. And a lot of our stuff was, you know what? If I don't hit that deer at 100 yards, I don't eat for the next 2-3 weeks. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So big difference in the mindset of some of the arms that we had access to over here and the stuff that they were using on the battlefield. And I think that was, one of many factors as to why we came out on top. Obviously, having an ocean between us certainly helped
That helped a lot.
in a large regard. If we would have been landlocked with England, I don't know that it would have went the same way.
Well, I read a lot about Revolutionary War. One of the things I found really interesting was the British was so confused when they took like Philadelphia, and they kept on taking, like they would take one capital, and like, okay, we got your capital, you guys have to give up now. We're like, we moved it over here. Then they go take that. Like, we got your capital, give up. They're like, it's actually over there now. They kept on,
Right? Yeah. Because it was a totally different game, right?
yeah.
It's like,
They couldn't
this is not capture the flag. If you want to defeat us, you're going to have to kill us all. That's what you're going to have to do.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely an interesting time, and the Revolutionary War is probably one of the most fun things for me to research, just because of the way things were done. The whole like Madison stuff. One of the things I got in an argument with someone about the Second Amendment. They try to say the Second Amendment was about only about the militia,
Oh,
blah blah
yeah.
blah. And I said, and I started talking about Madison's writing, and they're like, "Well, that's only one founding father. What does he know?" Like, he wrote it. He wrote the Second Amendment. That was his baby.
Yeah. Yeah. People use that militia clause a lot, and I've seen them turning around, and they said that the Second Amendment, it gives the government right to have arms, and I'm like,
What when?
so every other amendment is about the individual, and about the protection of the rights for the people, and about stopping government encroachment, except for that one. It's like
Well,
that don't make any sense.
well,
So there's a lot of arguments, but it's people that pick and pluck and take out of context,
yeah,
unfortunately.
even if it was just about the militia, but at the time, you had the regular army and the militia. The militia was made up of, I think, all males from age like 15 or something to 56. So,
Hmm.
okay, if you want to say it's about a militia, guess what a 15-year-old me is gonna do? I'm gonna go get myself a rifle.
Right. And they pick on the big term that they pick on a lot is the regulated. And they got to realize in the context of what they're talking about, regulated
I
doesn't
mean, well
mean
trained.
the same thing.
Yeah.
There's multiple definitions for the word regulated,
You can't
and
have.
they're picking and choosing the definition that is not consistent with the original intent. In fact, it's not even consistent. It's a fish out of water, so to speak. If you use that in that context within the Second Amendment, then the Second Amendment absolutely just doesn't make any sense. And the founders, they didn't write anything. There's nothing in the Bill of Rights that does not make sense and is not pointedly clear.
Well, regulated back then does. I mean, what regulated meant back then. Our definition of what we use regulated for now didn't exist back then.
Mm-hmm.
So unless they had Doc Brown in a DeLorean, there's no way that's what that means.
Regulated was used then as a term of regular, like readily accessible, basically.
Exactly. But man, they don't get it. I think there's two people. People who are blissfully ignorant on what the Second Amendment is. I mean, on their side at least. And the second group of people are people who are intellectually dishonest about what the Second Amendment is.
Yeah. Yeah, we spoke about that earlier. There's a ton of intellectual
Yeah,
dishonesty that goes on all sides, unfortunately.
Yeah, we spoke about it on your podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right,
Yep.
Chris. I know it's getting late. Usually I only go an hour, and I've been over an hour for about 30 minutes now.
Right. So, hey, man, it's your house. So, yeah, if you got to kick me out, that's fine. I'll sleep on the porch. It's all good.
Nah, man, I just don't want to. I told you an hour, and I don't want to keep you, way over. I know you probably have other stuff to do.
Well, I know how it is with replays, and if you go too long, then you risk your people, following up on replay too. So, a little bit of a back to a little bit of the tech talk there, but. I know how that is too. Well, we've had a good conversation. We covered a lot of ground, so hopefully folks find it interesting.
There is one question that I wanted to talk to you about your Thursday night podcast. It's not podcast, your Thursday night after hours chat. Do you find that your audience for that is different from your regular shows?
It's not in the live realm. In the live realm, it's pretty much the same followers from the firearm 2A stuff, all of that. But I do try to tailor that in a way, even though that a lot of times we talk about firearm related content, we talk about 2A related issues. I do try to make the topic relevant in a way for anybody listening, because that was kind of the original approach, and because you make contacts as you do this, and most of those contacts are other creators, and they're in the same sphere and same niche, which is firearms and 2A. So the people that are interested in coming on and participating, I'm going to use the word unfortunately. It's not really unfortunate, because I love the guys and I love having them on, you included. But as far as diversity's sake, as far as niche goes, anyway, not any other type of diversity, just strictly niche, creator niche. Unfortunately, it kind of lends itself to lean that direction. However, in the replays and the shares and a lot of the stuff like that, I do have creators from different niches that do comment occasionally. They'll DM or message me about something that we talked about, or email me or something like that. So I try to do it in a way that does span all genres. But unfortunately, the nature of the beast is we're in the firearm 2A, and that is the majority of obviously who watch live, and who also the majority of who watch in replay as well.
Yeah, honestly, I join in those after our chats because moving from like the wordsmithing realm into the video live stream content creator realm, I learn a lot from you guys. That you've been around the block.
And you've got it was a great show this last week. Anybody out there listening, I mean, go check that one out if you're interested in the relationships with companies and promotion and a lot of different things like that.
For that too.
But you bring the other thing. Cool thing is, okay, yeah, I get you, and I'm flattered, and the other ones too, that you come in and you're able to pick up on some things and learn some things. That's great, but we can learn from you too, because it's kind of like I said, starting out with diversity. We have to be diverse, and you hold some skill, and you have the experience to teach some of us some different ways that we can do things as well. So sharing that knowledge is really important.
I don't know if G Web's told you, but I polled a bunch of companies why it's easier for writers to get sponsors than YouTube creators.
Uh,
And he actually knew what it was. He talked to someone else who told him the same exact thing. And the answer I got back almost to a T was, you have the ability to get my press release run on sites, because I
yeah.
can send it to you and you can send it to your editors and they will run it. If I send it to just the like news at mln.com, there's about a 20% chance it's going to get run and about an 80% chance it will never see the light of day. But I can
Hmm.
guarantee it will get run if I send it to you.
Right.
So, press releases. And I told G-Webs, and he was like, yeah, that's what somebody else told me. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
we've
yeah.
we've talked about that, but and G Webs did tell me that. So I'm going to get with you, and if you're willing, I would like for you to come on and help out, and we'll kind of do a reboot talking about press releases, if that's cool.
Yeah, because had no idea, man. It was just, it's like,
Yeah. The whole idea of it makes sense. We've and like G told you, and yeah, we've had a show on that previously and had a guest on, but he couldn't really get specific. He didn't have the same experience you've got, right? And so he couldn't really get specific. He knew about that from like the side that puts out the press releases, right?
okay.
Not the side like you that disseminates. So he was coming at it kind of from that angle and trying to fill in gaps. And so, I mean, the guy's very knowledgeable and knows his sphere of things, but
Hmm.
yeah, it just didn't. It was hard for him to complete the picture. So I think that you may hold the key to actually completing the picture on that, and that may be a game changer. You never know.
Yeah, it might. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. We're
You
going to be
bet.
doing more of these. I'm not going to be on this Saturday. I got a wedding to go to, but I got some interesting people coming up. Not all gun related too. I have a documentary filmmaker coming up,
Nice.
and I have a friend of mine from like elementary school. And the reason why I'm not having him on, he's a dentist. Like, why would I want to have a dentist on? He grew up during the killing fields in Cambodia.
Mm.
So he was a refugee. The camp he was in, when he got to the camp, it had close to 900 kids in there. When he left, only three were living, and him and his sister were two of them.
Wow.
So he's going to talk about, uh, because he sees all these people, preaching, socialism, socialism, communism, communism. Oh, it's great, great, great. And his opinion is, yeah, you don't want to go down that road. So he's going to talk about that, his experiences, how they escaped, and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to that. But,
Yeah.
so that's not going
That'll
to be
be.
2A centric, but it's going to be something that I think that people are going to find fascinating and get a lot out of.
Well, all of the things. I mean, whatever you talk about. I mean, it all kind of plays a part. I mean, it's a factor at some point. So, like I said, sometimes I think we do get too firearm centric. We accuse the other side of fixating on the inanimate object a lot of times, and we do that ourselves. That we kind of fixate on the object, and we're not looking at the principles um, behind why the Second Amendment applies. It's not because of the firearm necessarily. It's because of those principles.
Yeah, and it's always been my goal to make a documentary film. And this guy, he came out with one called "On Your Mark, Get Set, Mo," which is about lawnmower racing, and he's traveled to Asia. This is one of it. He traveled to Asia to, to film some other documentaries. So that's what he does. He just travels around doing documentaries. So I'm gonna have him on to, talk about the method and how to create documentaries. Like even if a
Right.
small YouTube documentary, like techniques and stuff.
Very cool. Yeah, that'd be neat.
But yeah, Roger, you're in a little bit too late. All right. Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate you coming on. I'm gonna
You
have you
bet,
back
John.
on. Tomorrow night, I will be on the Hank Train Show starting at 7 p.m. 7 to 9 over on the Hank Stream Show. It's gonna be a great discussion. We have a partner, Amaland and him have a partnership. GOA and him have a partnership. If you want to join the GOA, you can do so. If you go to gunowners.org /black-swan-media, you can join for only $10, which is a great deal for 1 year. We are going to be doing another GOA giveaway of a membership at the end of this month for anyone who is a subscriber. I'm keeping track of everything. So join, you can win one. That, and I just want to make an announcement. My Facebook page, which I launched only several months ago, is now over 10,000 subscribers. Now let's get everyone on YouTube to do the same exact thing, because
Right.
this is kind of yeah. I broke 10,000 today. I was like counting down.
Nice.
Yeah. Then that's it. I'm gonna play the outro.
You've been watching Fireside Chats with
Yes, you
John
have.
Crump, a Black Swan Media Group production. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Tune in every week for a conversation with the difference makers in the world.